And we're live. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me again. Hope you're well. So, a few bits to talk about tonight. It's getting to be that the situation, in a way, remains the same in Ireland. There's a lot going on every day and every week, and yet it's kind of some of the same stuff, and yet there's still more to say on it. So, what I want to talk about tonight is, well, I want to talk about the tent city, excuse me, in Dublin to begin with. There's more on that. Leading into then a discussion about how Irish politicians are failing to get their hands around the situation that's kind of gone beyond their control. And that's why I mentioned repetitiveness in a sense. This show, this podcast, live stream, whatever, is kind of becoming me in a sense, um, pointing and laughing at the states, like little articles and stuff about with elections coming up and all of that, and with the situation getting so out of hand, they're trying to sound like they're addressing it, and it's funny, and I enjoy laughing at it, and I enjoy talking to you about it. So, a few couple of weeks ago it was Helen McEntee, now it's Simon Harris, the Taoiseach, and it's just I don't know, it's always the same, and yet it's always fresh, and it's always fun to look, point, and laugh. So I want to kind of go from the tent city into that. Then I want to talk about and this it's kind of all connected, how the state in Ireland has lost the information war on migration. Now, I'm borrowing in a sense because someone at the Keith Woods published an article a few days ago. I should find the title. I've forgotten what the title was, but a Substack article kind of outlining this. An excellent article. I might just talk about it more when we get to it, but along these lines effectively. But I think it's clear to everyone. It's one of those moments where he's written a good article on it, excellent, and yet it's kind of like sometimes these things are just of the moment. He's reading the tea leaves, seeing it, observing it, inspired to write an article about it, and yet at the same time, even before he's published, a lot of people are feeling the same things that maybe inspired him to write it. So it's almost like, again, he's coined it. He's done one of the best actually write up on this issue I've seen that exists, right? um and yet it's also just something that is becoming patently obvious to people, in maybe especially the last 2 or 3 weeks, how badly the state has lost and continues to lose on the information war. I want to kind of get into it a little bit, kind of reminisce a bit on how we got here. So it's all connected. Tent City, how the state is trying to deal with this, and how they have just lost in general. So that's the kind of theme for tonight. So I'll get into it all. As always, feel free to share this on your social media if you want to. You can super chat, you can follow the link in the description, you can support the channel if you appreciate it. You can follow me on social media. And yeah. And just as a general housekeeping type of thing as well. It's hard for me to monitor the chat. If you want to leave a tiny super chat, or if you under the video after it's published. In general, I am curious to know what people want, because some people want me to go on for 5 hours rambling. Some people are irate at me because I do ramble. Some people want this and that, and I'm wondering myself, this kind of whole thing of something like a 5 nights a week show regularly, which would be hard for me to do, but say I could do it, a regular show, and I go on every night and I just kind of do I've always thought this would be a good idea, which is effectively, if you say you're busier than I am, or you have less attention or patience for it than I do, something like that. You're working in a job where you don't have free time to scroll, that type of thing, right? Or whatever it happens to be. And at the end of the evening, you want to live your life. You don't want to scroll back on 5 hours or a whole day worth of kind of what happened, or some key videos, some key moments, and what the narrative is throughout the day. And so if you could just tune into a regular podcast or show in the evening that goes on for what, an hour and a half, and it just kind of grabs everything from the day, that would be good in a sense. But then it's not going to be like mind-blowing hot takes. It's just going to be kind of going, because I can't give a hot take that often on everything. Or there's the 2 nights a week where it's very concentrated, it's well prepared, it's got a lot of talking points. I can do various things, but I'm just curious. I'll decide ultimately how this thing shapes up. But I'm curious to know what you think about it too. So with all that said, I hope you're all well. And just a FYI too, my computer is like, I'm gonna move the mouse, it takes like 10 seconds for it to react and everything. So do let me know if there's any lag issues. So what I'm going to do tonight, again, it's just a sort of a casual tab scroll. So I'm going to go through a lot of tabs. You can see there already. But these kind of help as little guideposts to talk about some of this stuff. So this is an opener. What I've realized is that some of you like to watch videos, just not outrage content, but stuff that's just annoying. Some of the videos that went most viral throughout the day and all of that. So I inevitably end up sharing a lot of Mick O'Keefe, Niall, and all these other lads, Toby's thoughts on Twitter, people like that, because they post it, and then I talk about it, I suppose, now. But I'm going to talk about the Tent City so a bit more, because this has been going on for weeks, and I have like more on it. But just watch it. This is just a like to whet the appetite, to get you to just general footage of the Tent City and the attitude among the people in it, and then we'll talk about it like substantively. So.
We have some privacy. You can't film here. We have some privacy. Don't film here. Please leave.
Now again, I always do it, but like, just use your intuition. Look at the lads here and tell me, do you see the archetypal refugee, the person who just wants to go home and is fleeing war and all of that? Is that what you're seeing? So that's that. Just to give you the idea, if you didn't already know, which of course you do. These are all Mick O'Keefe's video here. It's like I'm just, anyway, he's happy for me to use his stuff. He posts content that's flying around all day. He's the best source for it, him and a few others. So this is another one. Now, I haven't streamed in a few days, so some of this stuff came out yesterday, the day before. But here's another one from, and I'm sorry I've forgotten his name, the origin source. Mick hasn't included either. He's like an Eastern European guy who does great vlogs, street journalism kind of stuff. But just watch this. This is where I get a bit more substantive now. Have a look at this.
Well, it's a never-ending story, looks like. Hello, guys. It seems to be.
Sorry, you probably don't know this, but there's a law that you can't report people who are interrupting participants without their consent.
Don't. We're in public.
Without their consent. Yes, but there's other laws that go above that. They're Irish laws, and you're breaking the Irish law.
You're not right. Law. You're not right. No,
I
sorry.
Right.
You're not, unfortunately.
I am right. Okay. Calling the guards.
What's
your name, sir?
Call the guards.
Call
the guards.
What's your name?
Call the guards.
If you don't think you're breaking the law, tell me your name.
Call the guards.
If you don't think you're breaking the law, tell me your name.
Call the guards.
Okay, I'm calling them.
So the kind of plot thickens with this lady, of course, as it always does. Thickens, says like. But she so this woman takes it upon herself to tell this man he can't film in public. Of course he can. He's perfectly at liberty to. There's no law against it. Just because a migrant encampment has been set up on the canal in the city, if you're allowed to walk around Phoenix Park and film the birds and film the people enjoying a nice day and take a video and all of that, then there's no different law. Just because you bring a bunch of migrants into this extreme situation, like lining the canal with these trespass tents, which a lot of people have commented on, by the way, is a hilarious irony. I kind of rolled my eyes when I first saw that, but as time goes on, it is funny actually. But So if anything, actually, it becomes more relevant to film that than just a random sunny evening. And she's saying it's the opposite. No, because this is a weird situation, you can't film or something like that. Just so annoying. But this woman, so the first question is like, wait, who's she? Like, what's she doing hanging around there? So this Twitter account here, Peter Paul Guy, has just the scoop on that basically. So while the government are saying it's a criminal offence to set up these tent cities and clearing them, and I'll get onto this, but how they're state-funded NGOs, oxymoron, are providing these tents, and then the same state comes around and clears the tents, crushes them, and then provides more tents over and over again in a loop. We'll talk about that. But this woman, I'll enlarge in the screen. Her name's Olivia Headon or something like that. And she's performing there as a volunteer. Headon works for the UN IOM. Let me look up what that is. It's whatever it is, some sort of migration NGO thing. Let me look it up. International Organization for Migration. So she works for that, basically an NGO head. I did look up her profile. She's like, her whole career, if you can call it that, is like a litany of comms person for this NGO and that NGO, a lot of UN, International Organization of Migration stuff. And she's down there, liaising with these migrants, these kind of lads grabbing their balls and saying fuck you to people and all that, right? And she's down there as if these are, again, if it was a bunch of like skinny pot-bellied African kids and like, they're forlorn mothers, that'd be one thing. You can debate it, but like that'd be one thing. But this woman, she's down there with what, dozens, hundreds of fully grown men in their 20s, 30s, acting like, what is it, Mother Teresa or something like that, working on behalf of an international, effectively working on behalf of the state. The UN is funded by the international community, so the regime, the state at large. She's down there, I assume paid by the state as some sort of agent or whatever you would call it, doing this, and then telling people, citizens who are not paid by the state, citizens who are in their, well, in this case, that guy's a foreigner, but generally people who are in their own country, at liberty to film a thing that is of public interest, extremely so, telling him he can't film, which is not true. So falsely telling him that, and effectively harassing the man. So she works for that organization, and then of course she's up on the telly, of course, right? I'm not on the telly. I don't know sour grapes on that. Don't think I'm part of the discussion on it. Like every second night they come on the TV and they talk about migration, and they're trying to be critical of it and they're trying to analyze it, and they don't think that people who for years and years have been on the front line discussing this, focusing on immigration. Let's talk to someone like that. No, but this woman is on there, and this sort of a paid agent, I suppose you could say. I assume she's paid in an agent. So as he said here, this is the key. She admitted, and I've been saying this for weeks and now I'm vindicated. She admitted last night on Virgin that they intentionally set up large illegal migrant camps to force the government into housing them. Now, whether that's housing them in better tented accommodation somewhere, or whether it's a hotel where they get to watch Netflix and eat bowls of jelly and ice cream all day and wander around, or whether that's a modular home, if you're lucky, we don't have all the information, but it's effectively being taken from the wandering, iced out, ignored migrant situation because the government have clammed up a little bit because they don't have the resources anymore. They just don't. Whether you're one of them, the people who basically are standing up, or what's the analogy? Musical chairs. The people who are standing up when the music stops, transferring themselves from being one of those, basically kind of off the books, not really plugged into the system where, basically if you can get on the conveyor belt, it's just a question of time. If you want to and you play your cards right and you listen to the NGO person right and you just play the game, the aim would be that you get a house, you get the dole, you get the medical card, you get the whole gig, you get a passport, and then your family come over and they get a house and a passport and the rest of it, right? That's where you want to be. That's the reason why you pick up sticks from where you are and say, I'm going to go to Ireland. And if you get here and the office just kind of shrug their shoulders at you because they've nowhere to put you, you're like, well, I don't want to be in the kind of the outsider category. I want to get into the system. And once I get into the system, once I get plugged in, once I get put into some tented accommodation or something better, I get my name on all the lists. I say that I have mental health issues and I'm anxious and I'm bisexual, fleeing homophobic Gambia. Like once I get the yarn spun, I get my liaison person, I get a crew of NGO people who I'm in touch with, and now I'm in the house, so to speak. I just need to get there, and the iPass are acting a bit frosty now because they just don't have. They basically the iPass are throwing a Hail Mary type of thing where they hope that if they just ignore us and let us just wander around, maybe we'll just go home. And these migrants are thinking, fuck that, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to do whatever I have to do. I'm already playing the game. What do I have to play? How do I have to play the game to force the state, who are getting a bit frosty on me? How do I force their hand? In comes this NGO infrastructure and all of that, who realize that, well, if we just set up these large encampments, that will put pressure on the state, because of, especially in South Dublin, to move you on. And they're not going to, the ideal thing would that they put you on a plane and chuck you out. They're not going to do that because there's institutional inertia. So perhaps they'll take the other option, which is just try to, it's like if a bus is full and no one can get on, it's like, well, what if everyone really sucked it in? We'll just get a few more on, and keep going. Just push a bit harder. So they're like, I want to be in that category of people who get included in we pushed a bit harder and we got a few more in. And so that's the dynamic anyway, is what I'm trying to tell you. And she basically confirms it on TV, on Virgin Media, whatever it is. If I would play, like I said, it's slow, so bear with.
That's all. But is it also to draw focus on the fact that here we are, we're sleeping rough, and we've seen when bigger groups gather that there's more of a chance that they will be bused to tented state accommodation and better facilities?
So yes, safety is one of the biggest reasons. People don't feel safe in smaller groups. But now the message is out that one of the only ways it seems like accommodation is being offered, at least in the last few weeks, is via these area cleanups. We haven't heard of many people receiving email offers anymore, but we're not in touch with everyone. It seems that the majority of people are getting accommodation through this means. So it's sending that message, and whether that is in contradiction to then the rhetoric that's been said by the government, to the media, it totally is, because you're saying one thing, we don't want to have a situation like this, but then by action, you're creating it.
Mm-hmm. But is it also to draw focus on the fact that...
So someone says in the chat that there's poor sound. No, you can confirm or deny that there, the rest of you, but I don't know what I can do about that. But so she basically admits it, if you couldn't hear. And by the way, this is just my personal subjective opinion, but it looked to me like she had duping delight on her face. If you're not familiar with that, look it up. The kind of coy smile you give when, like, there's a little bit of a secret, or a little bit of something you're keeping under your hat, or it's kind of funny to you, and there's this particular smile. So it looked like that to me, but I'm not a mind reader. But she also says, oh, well, it seems like it's this and that and the other. Now, she says, it seems like, well, if they do these encampments, they can get put on, but they can get into the system. Otherwise, they're left wandering around and they don't actually get their email to be like, your tent, your hotel, your modular home, your whatever is ready. They don't get the email. They're just being sort of, again, like, it's like you're trying to show up to a party and no one tells you that you're not welcome, but you start texting everyone saying, and you're just not getting a reply from like 3 people at the same time. And you kind of think, they don't want me here, do they? They're hoping I just stop texting and go home or something like that, and so you start fighting back, going, no, I'm going to find this place. Which again is annoying, because it's like, listen, just go home. Like, these are all lads. These aren't what anyone considers a refugee in a real sense. These are people largely from Nigeria, Algeria, Georgia, Albania, you name it. Places that under no circumstances can be considered legitimate asylum seekers. I don't believe there is such thing in general as a legitimate asylum seeker, but that's me. So So basically, yeah, you're getting the state are collapsing under their own pressure, and instead of actually addressing it by organizing repatriation and all of this kind of stuff, they're just kind of playing. They're just what's the word? Ghosting. They're ghosting these asylum seekers. And so your one is saying, well, it seems to be like this. She's smart enough to say it seems to be that that's how it's working. Well, I think it's more than seems to be that's how it's working, because I mean, you're down there chatting away with them, telling you work for the UN International Organization of Migration, and you're down there chatting away with these refugees. I have another word for them I can't use on YouTube, but so I don't know. I think it's probably a more less of a case that you're observing the fact, and maybe more the case that you're involved in this process. I think that's reasonable and defensible to say. So that's the situation. So basically, my speculation over the course of weeks, which I mean, it was obvious to anyone with a brain, but I don't have to caveat that it's speculation. It's confirmed by her basically here, because it's like, why would they keep popping back up? It's kind of intuitively obvious. Why would they keep coming back to stay in these tents? Like, that's not the life you want. Why would they refuse certain accommodation and return again? Because they took a shot and they're like offered the tents down in Crookston, and they said, no, I'm going back until you put me somewhere proper. I want a hotel. I want something proper, like my mates got 6 months ago and a year ago. And I'm just going to basically force the government's hand by continuing to return to these tents. And then these semi-state kind of agents like this woman are, greasing the skids, her and probably dozens and dozens of others. Which shows that like there is a disconnect between the NGO shadow state and the state itself. It's awkward. It's basically a total shit show at this point. And yet the state are trying to tell us they're working on it, while people like her are down there working against what the state alleges they're trying to do. And it's just a complete basket case. And the only people who are talking any sense on this are people like me and people like hundreds of others, thousands of others, the commentators. It's just mad. And yet the only people who are speaking kind of common sense on this, the closest thing they could include is maybe the odd Niall Boylan, who is kind of half talking about it and stuff. And yet, but the real situation is that anyone who is really talking common sense on this is blackballed and blacklisted. And so in their own little echo chamber, they're trying to allege that they're fixing it or working on it in some kind of fashion. But it's, again, from the outside looking in, for me, it's just popcorn. It's great. I hate the way the country is going, but as a spectacle, it's mad to watch. So the next thing kind of follows from this, she's an NGO person. So there's an interview here. It's this is fair use. It's Anton Savage on the Anton Savage show. I'm taking it in fair use and all that. It's a Mick O'Keefe. So as far as I'm aware, it's the Mick O'Keefe show. Who knows? But so there's this guy Anton Savage. He's been around for a long time. Kind of smooth operator type of guy. Good talker, intelligent and all that. But radio show person. He does comm stuff. Works with businesses, gives speeches and stuff like that. He's one of these people within the regime, I would say. Pat Kenny is probably like this too, and a few others, but he's not just totally like you and stupid. But I would argue that someone like him, it's not like he just woke up, and this is something that you should know. It's not like he just woke up one day and decided to have a slightly critical view of the government's mismanagement of the asylum immigration system. He didn't just like have an epiphany suddenly because it just got out of control. This is obviously someone like him. When you hear his voice, you're hearing the state and the regime deciding to create a dialectic and deciding to a release valve of like, well, let's begin a mild criticism of the worst excesses of the situation, because we have to. And someone like him comes in. It's not that he has some like sudden heartfelt belief that the things are great, because of course, if that was the case, he would have looked at it 2 years ago and sort of been speaking about it regularly on a radio show or whatever. He hasn't. So what you're hearing is Roderick O'Gorman being interviewed and sort of grilled by him. But these are both, not to sound like a conspiracist, but what you're hearing effectively is this dialectic. The state are completely at a loss, and he's kind of grilling them within reason on it. And yet, anyway, with all that said, it is good. The guy does, like I say, he's intelligent, like at some basic kind of level. So he's able to nicely just kind of hound O'Gorman, who is the Minister for Integration, whatever, on the situation, the kind of TLDR of the state-funded NGOs delivering these tents to people, and then the state coming around a day or two later and clearing the tents, like destroying them, and then erecting fences, and then the next day providing indirectly state-funded tents to the same people and directing them to find a good place to pitch a tent, and then the same thing goes around and around in circles. It's kind of funny. I'll just play little bits.
What happens now if you seek international protection is you arrive into Dublin, for some of the people who are seeking international protection, and you are handed a government tent. We give you a tent. No, you're shaking your head.
No, that doesn't happen.
Where did they get the tent?
As you know, we're not in a position to accommodate everybody. Where people aren't accommodated, they engage with a number of NGOs that our department support in terms of providing services to international protection applicants who haven't been accommodated. And those are a range of services. They may be access to meals, access to showers during the day, access to charging facilities,
A tent?
and a number of those NGOs where they identify that the individual is at risk of rough sleeping. A number of those NGOs may provide tent or a sleeping bag.
And we fund that.
Our department funds NGOs in terms of providing what they see are the necessary services to individuals.
Okay, but the money may travel a circuitous route. The end result is the same. The government supplies you a tent and says, find somewhere to stay. The government then comes around by the other hand and takes your tent away.
Government has an obligation in terms of providing accommodation, to international protection applicants. As you know, we're not in a position to meet
Okay, so we've got some loading issues there. I think you get the idea, probably. So you can find that. Bear with me. I can't even close the window because the whole thing is so slow. I just FYI, I paid for fiber internet in order to do this, so maybe it's the rain or something. Maybe I have too many tabs open. Who knows? Could be a lot of stuff going on. Could be the feds. Could be Mossad. I just have a window open in front. Maybe I should just monologue a bit. So
that obligation to everybody at the moment. As such,
off. Sorry, because it's still playing over me. Escape. Anyway, so basically,
rather than leaving people destitute, we support.
Oh man, sorry. Turn down the volume all the way. So Anton Savage goes back and forth to them like 3 or 4 times. It's pretty desperate out of O'Gorman. He reiterates the question maybe 4 or 5 times. So you have the state-funded NGOs. They pay for the tents.
Homelessness NGOs.
This is getting really silly, isn't it, lads? Let's be real. System's just a bit overloaded. Can't handle it. I have a Chromebook, which is probably a bad idea. Yeah, how it's anyway, that roundabout silly situation that's going on. And O'Gorman just keeps dodging it, like politicians answer, not really answering the question, kind of silly, ridiculous. And yet that's what they're actually doing. Instead of, which would be a reasonable situation. I can't handle this. Like what would be a reasonable situation is just to say, listen, we have, like, without having to deport someone who's been here 2 generations, they're a foreign ethnicity, but they're here.
But as I understand
all these other questions. We don't have to go anywhere near that. By just taking the lad who's been here 3 months and he's from Algeria, Nigeria, under no common sense definition of asylum seeker,
which could be months away.
Instead of just going, every benefit and incentive you have to be in the country, we're clearing. Gone. Right, gone. Stroke of a pen, you were able to do it with COVID. You can't do whatever you want to do. You're the state. You could just, stroke of a pen, withdraw that overnight.
And this stance will
any NGO who is ultimately the state, whether funded internationally or nationally, who is circumventing that,
the work that
basically
I'm doing,
undermining that
and
by
Taoiseach has
sweeping in with their own money
coordinated
and their own
across a number
support,
of
you
government
crack down on
departments
them. You say
to
you're not allowed to
deliver
do that.
extra
That goes against the
capacity
spirit
is the
and the
absolute
effective state
focus of
policy. No, you're
government.
not doing it.
But is there
And
not a
then
better
you
way than
organise
saying,
charter
here's a
flights or
tent, have
whatever
at
it
it?
is, and you say,
The
lads,
best
just go home.
way is to
That would
provide
just
state
the
provided
lowest hanging
accommodation.
fruit
That
you
is
can
the best
imagine.
way.
There's
We're not
nobody
in a
in the
position to
earth
do
that
that
could
for
possibly do
everybody
that.
right now.
That
As I
would be
say,
that
since
solution.
we
Bear in mind, that would be
introduced
a
the
good solution.
comprehensive
And not only
accommodation
are they not
strategy, we
doing it,
have been able
but
to
they're
provide
taking in hundreds
450
more every
additional
year.
spaces. More
Hundreds
spaces
more
will
every
come
year.
online
So
in the weeks
not
ahead,
only are they
and I
doing
believe
what
we will be in a
not only are
position
they
where we're
so
able to
what I'm
provide
saying is they're
a level of
allowing common
accommodation
sense.
to everybody.
They're
But I
allowing
have to
to
recognise
make it get worse all the time.
there is
Just
some
having
work
something
to do before we
instead of
can
just having
provide
a
that
big
offer
million
to everybody.
But then what we are cleaning up as a state is, and I don't mean that that's pejorative, because it tends to end up with jet the cleanup of the areas. What we are cleaning up is what we create. We hand out dozens, if not hundreds, of tents. We say best of luck. They set up a tented village. We then come around. We pay security to clear them up. We bin all the tents, I assume at no cost, and then we set up barriers to stop the people that we gave tents to from putting the tents where it's logical to put them.
Someone says Bulmer Jackie puts if I'm being honest, someone says Bulmer Jackie, if I'm being honest, this is not some sort of issue of mine that I just don't understand something or other. A computer and an internet should be able to easily handle all this, but it can't. So I don't know. It's just like that's a straightforward tech difficulties. Although I am a boomer, so can you still? Oh, someone said that's all. Okay, thanks, lads. Apologies for that. Look, too many tabs open. There's many nights I've been on here, and they can handle several tabs. I think it actually is the rain. I've seen the rain is the issue, or I've seen the rain can be an issue with reception or whatever it is in the past. So anyway, that kind of tanked me a little bit there. But so anyway, you maybe couldn't hear me before. So you have basically this tent situation, which is a total farce. It's around in circles and it makes no sense rather than deporting people and stopping new people coming in. Like the fundamental issue would be to deport people who shouldn't be here, low-hanging fruit, and stop people who shouldn't be coming here from coming here. And with all these plantation centers that they've already set up, even like, and I'm speaking from their perspective, not mine, I would do far more than this, but from their own perspective, doing that would, because of the amount of capacity they've set up everywhere from Newtown, Mount Kennedy to Listonvarna and elsewhere, that would start to be able to absorb then the over stretching of the system as it is. It would settle down a bit, right? And you wouldn't have this canal situation. All the migrants could get their modular home, hotel room. It would all be grand. Slow it down a bit. They won't do that. That's the funny thing. They won't do it, and so you're left with this Mickey Mouse system with the tents, and even the regime media are starting to point and laugh at them about it. So then, meanwhile, you come back to what are the regimes saying about this? I can't even change tab, honestly, and the amount of ads. Anyway, so we have here Simon Harris has replaced Helen McEntee as the latest spokesperson. It seems like they've pulled her off exit stage left, and they've replaced her with Simon Harris, who, according to everyone from, I don't know, Fintan O'Toole or someone like that, John McGurk, is an excellent communicator. You have to hand it to him, allegedly. I think it's awful. But anyway, he is now calling for a bit of common sense and all these kind of buzzwords. The new thing they're talking about is common sense, which is very much like what Pat Rabin is saying. So common sense to migration. This is just something I want to focus on for a sec. She's saying that basically Ireland depends on migration, but we have to get a handle on it in a way that's like the ridiculous shit, like the tent cycle of destruction and resupply of tents and all of this canal stuff. That has to end, but also humane and all of that. And in Ireland, immigration is great. Passionate people, and our economy runs on it and all of that. So, we just need to curb the worst excesses, to challenge the far right, stave them off, restore order to the country. But in general, the whole situation is peachy, lovely. So that's the kind of her narrative, and the same is echoed by Harris himself. Harris himself says, he says, our immigration policy is going to be grounded in common sense. So again, that's the new. These things are done in a mimetic fashion. Every week there's a new term. it's all now about common sense. Simon Harris had this ex-journalist, I've forgotten her name, I don't really care, turned communications officer for him. And so you basically have like the, oh my God, what a complete Ashling crowd are like, as they did with Leo Varadkar, sort of trying to create his speaking style and narrative selection. So he says stuff now like a bit of common sense, right? With the bit of abbreviated to the common parlance of a bit of common sense, which they think is going to appeal to boomers or the average person. Maybe it will. So he's got this whole new shtick now where he's talking kind of tough apparently on immigration. Just like fundamentally everything's right, the worst excesses need to be curbed, and somehow that so that's them basically trying to catch up to the 10. But of course, what we've seen, the lag, it just, sorry, it's hard to operate here because it's like I depend on looking at these tabs and so it kind of gets in my way. But someone in one of the articles mentioned that just in the last couple of years, our health service has taken on like registered and all of this. So they think, well, we should stop bringing in total spoofer asylum seekers from Nigeria or reduce the number, but we should be bringing in 50,000, whatever it is, Indians. And I've noticed that in the last few years, Indians has picked up huge. These things are all between countries and stuff. It's been Indians galore for the last few years. Before that, of course, we had a huge wave of Brazilians. Oh, I don't even know if I'm live. Like, anyway, so yeah. Yeah. The audio is almost unlistenable at this point. Okay, well, it's a tough one because I don't really have that many videos open. I just have a few tabs. Sorry about that, lads. Maybe if I just go to me. I don't know. Maybe I just have to riff. I have to go freestyle. So, like, we have basically it's this idea that you're turn off my camera. Okay, this is, I'm not going to call it a write-off, but like this is very much like whatever gets out, gets out. Yeah. I don't know what it is, the rain or something, but like what I'm getting to, if you can hear me, man, is the idea, like they're trying to say that we'll curb the worst, not the asylum industry entirely, but the worst excesses of it, and that will stave off the opposition and the growing unrest and dissatisfaction in Ireland. That's not true. It might work with a few boomers if you plant them in front of the couch or the telly on the couch watching RTE. Maybe they'll absorb those points. And so be it. Do you know what? Actually, here's a good idea. Kelly tells me here, hi Kelly, by the way, that it's much better without the tabs. Now, all I'm doing is reading the tabs to you when I have them up in front of you. So, like, it's not like you're watching me and reading along with the fucking article anyway. So I might as well just read it to you. If there's something I'm using here to read from, so be it. So, like, it's just a case of like that's not going to work. It's a temporary, maybe red meat to the masses for a week or two or whatever, but it's not addressing the fundamental issue. And that's what I'm seeing a lot, is this idea that, well, there's been so much noise made on the asylum issue, if we can sort of 10% address the worst of that, then somehow we're addressing the situation. In reality, there's political correctness in Ireland, so people are limited, but people like me and you and others who are dissident on this understand that while people may be gagged on the issue, it's not purely that they're annoyed about unvetted mails, passports not being offered at the airport, all of the rest of it. That's the outcrop of the iceberg that people are pointing to and expressing their frustration on. What really is getting people, of course, is that they go to the park, as a video came out recently of Powers Court and other places, and everyone's a foreigner. This is from people who traditionally would have no issue with a foreigner, like, you know, just a foreigner here, a foreigner there, so be it, no big deal, right? The average sane person isn't losing sleep about that. But even people who are normal are going to a park and looking around and thinking almost everyone here is a foreigner. Um, I was talking to someone recently who was returning from Canada. Canada is probably one of the few places that in the world that's worse than Ireland right now, who had their kid at a play school. And what I'm told is that this is in like one of the big Canadian cities, that barely any of the childminder creche people, whatever they're called, could speak English properly at all. And most of the kids were Asian and other backgrounds like that, and they barely spoke English either. And so they would be in their own cliques. Excuse me. They'd be in their own cliques. And this kid who was Irish was kind of excluded and wasn't getting spoken to because none of the childminder people could really speak English, and none of the other kids really could either. And so had developed a sort of a speech delay, developmental issues with speech. They pulled the kid out of there, brought them home, and within a couple of weeks, the speech rapidly caught up and improved. So there was literal developmental damage being done to these kids. You had Susie Delaney of kind of the Irish Inquiry. She spoke in Dublin a couple of weeks ago there recently. She talks about this frequently, how her kid effectively feels like a foreigner in the class. They're a minority anyway in the class, and then they're being told that they're the bad one, as opposed to just a member of a multicultural class or whatever. No, you still carry the baggage of being the majority, but you're not the majority. And there's all the linguistic and racial abuse issues and all this happening to the kids. So there's damage being done to kids. You have old people in elder care, which shouldn't even exist really. We should have intergenerational families and support for that, but we don't. And so people are in these centers. This is well publicized in America, and you've seen many cases of it in Ireland with this serial rapist being beaten and raped by people from a different continent south of Europe, largely. Toxic situation in general. It takes a lot of patience to look after dementia elders and stuff like that. And then when you add in the cultural disconnect and the poor wages and conditions, it gets worse and worse. I know I sound like I'm off on a screed now. I'll come back to the point. I had the last. I have my home now, but where I last lived, someone in the area I was speaking to, who was a very nice person in general, but just a conduit of regime psychology, I suppose. She told us at one point, told me that she had worked. She was working in some capacity, like advertising or comms or something like that, with this elder care conglomerate that ran loads of centers around the country, talking away about how it's good work and stuff. And I'm talking to the bigwigs in there. I'm doing great, like, you know. And she obviously had sort of absorbed something that someone had said to her, and she said it back to me in the fashion that they had said it to her, as if it was like, oh, this is great. She said, oh, you know, it's flying at the moment, this thing. It's like printing money. I could tell she was repeating it from some prick dummy who'd said it to her, and she thought it was the cool thing to say or something like that. It's like printing money. So there's money galore for this. Basically, take lots of money from the state to care for these elder people who their kids can't care for anymore because they're both working 11-hour days trying to look after their own kids. So then the state gives lots of money to these big conglomerates to look after these old people. The big conglomerates then hire cheap migrant labor to reduce costs as much as possible. And they have this, much like with the asylum industry, like an easy contract. What's the word for it? Tenderology or something like that. There's a funny word for that, but like a easy government tender, which throws you a fortune of money, and then you cut your costs on the other side. And it's just like, as she said, it's like printed money, right? And meanwhile, you have this woman being raped by the African migrant, dozens probably of women. And when they tell people, they're not listened to, and etc. On and on and on. So all of this is happening. The abuse and destruction of children and our old people. There's a story here. If I dare I pull up a tab, the whole thing will fall to shit. I won't do it. I've just changed tab and it's loading now, and I'm probably going to start roboting. It's poor form. But there was a story from a couple of years ago, and it's ongoing. I'm worried I'm going to start seizing up here because the thing is loading now again. Bear with me. So basically, there's been this thing of the last few years where they're trying to sort of pull Irish out of the school system. Effectively, there's so many exemptions with Ukrainians and Gaelskulls that they're putting Ukrainians and Gaelskulls because they need somewhere to put them, and so the Gaelskulls have to stop speaking exclusively in Irish, which is their whole raison d'etre. So you have that kind of destruction of our own culture, our own basic institutions, our language. But what you also have is the discussion, the floating of the idea of removing the requirement for teachers, primary and secondary, to have Irish. I don't know what it is, but some sort of basic standard of Irish in order to just become a teacher, full stop, in Ireland. That's always been the case, right? And they're talking about getting rid of that. And I wish I had the tab, because I did post about this a while back. So that guy, Brian, whatever his name is, the Sinn Féin proxy guy all over Twitter, he was giving out about the idea that they're trying to remove Irish because of the pressures. And I said to him, this is back in 2022, I said, it's not realistic to bring in millions of people in a couple of decades with their own cultures and language, many of whom are still working on their English, and expect them to care to learn Irish. It's creating a numerical and cultural asymmetry between pupils and teachers. So basically, again, if you bring in, or whatever, none of them can speak Irish nor care to learn it. And then you get to the point where the population is largely, the young population especially, to an outsized degree, the younger population who are now growing to the age of 20, and the age where the teacher bearing age, if you could call it that, a lot of them are foreigners, a lot of them are. And so what are you going to do there? They don't want to learn Irish, so they're just going to avoid teaching. And yet you've brought in 1 million people who need to be taught in a school. So you're creating this kind of this bottleneck in the system, where if you just took that out and said anyone can become a teacher, just like anyone can become a barista or a elder care person. So you create a symmetry then between the migration flow and the institutional capacity, whether it's teaching or baristas or whatever else. You create a smoothness and a sort of a flow between that. So you bring in 1 million people, but you can have enough of those 1 million people will look after elders, will make coffee, will become teachers. Well, it's a disc scratch if you have this Irish thing in the way. That creates a hurdle and a bottleneck. So you have to rip that out. It's the only way to move forward. You cannot sustain that. I would admit that myself. You cannot that contradiction has to be weeded out. So you'll have the Irish thing taken away. Of course, the language will be destroyed. It's literally I don't see how at all it's possible to do it otherwise, especially in the cities where, yeah, you can get Irish neeves from the hinterland to learn Irish and train in Mary I, but they're not going to be able to afford to work in Dublin at a relative pittance and be able to build their 4 or 5 bedroom house in the country on their parents' land, new build, be RA rated, live the dream or whatever. So they're not going to, it's going to basically the race to the bottom will cancel them out. It's basically not sustainable. So again, I'm going off a bit, but what you have is this common sense thing on migration, on the asylum system. All you need to do is address the worst excesses of the asylum system. That is clearly not the case. It's not it at all. If you were to go to most Irish people and say, regardless of the asylum excesses, are you comfortable with Irish people becoming a minority, which they're doing? It's not 20, 30 years away. It's happening as we speak. We're on the precipice, I believe, in effect. They're not comfortable with that. They're not comfortable with, here's another one for you, playgrounds. I'm a parent of 2 very young kids. And so I find myself in a playground a lot, taking them out. It's something, if you're not a parent of a young child, whether you're older, your kids are raised, or whether you're just childless, something you ought to know is that as bad as you think the demographic situation is, just by going into town or whatever, and it's, you go into Dublin, you see it face on, but you can be out in the hinterland, you can be out in a random town and say, oh, well, there's not that many foreigners here. Go to a playground somewhere like that if you've kids, and you will see the difference. It's very disarming, disorienting, because you'll go into an average playground a lot of the time and you'll think, well, there's a bunch of Roma there, there's a load of Brazilians here, some Ukrainians over there, and there's me, and there's that one other couple with their kid far across the other side of the playground who I think are Irish. So it's a complete, you could say, melting pot. You and that other Irish people, there's no more of you than there are those Ukrainians and those other Ukrainians and those Indians and those other Indians. You realize that, like, oh, we're in it. Like, it's not some sort of, oh, the demographics are going to tip over in 20, 30 years. Maybe. But in effect, they're tipping right now in our faces, in real life, in front of us. That is a fact. So, and I might do a detailed piece on this by breaking down the percentage of Irish, not just overall as the population. Because look, if you go over the age of 50, everyone's Irish, and there's a lot of boomers, so that skews things. The reality is that when you go down the list to where it matters, we're on the minority chopping block as we speak, as I talk to you now. So these issues are, and of course, that, like I said, that leads to elder care issues, kids, all sorts of stuff that matter to people. The average person, they might not be willing to express it. They might not even have the vocabulary to express it, the willingness or the consciousness, but they do get it. They feel it, and they're frustrated by it. So they might engage with the asylum thing as their issue, but that's not addressing it at all. The plantation centers is just insult to injuries, having to see that. But that's the reality. And I see this sort of discussion, like, I want to put it up for you here. I can just read it. Taoiseach Simon Harris. So it's this idea that we need common sense. We need to get a better turnaround. It's like, that's going to play well for a week. But this is just me, like, as always, but to be honest, no strategy. I'm going to tell you what the reality is instead of being strategic. Like, that's not, it's an electioneering game because there's locals coming up and generals probably in like the later this year. But it's not really going to, especially in the long term, the 5-year, the 2-year, even the immediate, it's not going to cut it. It's just staving things off. To talk about the asylum industry a little bit, as well as this idea that, which they keep referring back to, and which is somewhat true given the situation we're in, is that Ireland, in terms of our construction workers, as we heard from Carol McNeil, whatever her name is, panel beaters, builders, healthcare workers, the whole lot. Oh, well, if we didn't have unlimited immigrants coming in here, our society would collapse. Someone says no super chats available tonight. Interesting. Well, that's my own misfortune, I suppose. That would be nice. I mean, if I'm come on here and do it, I'd accept the super chats, but if they're not there, that's a pity. I'll have to just as an FYI, yeah, I have, it's not easy trying to do these payment processes and stuff. They keep throwing curveballs. I have to do a bit of admin on that. Maybe that's my issue. But so, like, this idea that the country, fundamentally, the infrastructure, how it works, the functioning of the country would fall apart with, like, hypothetically no migration. There's a case in which that's true. Yeah, like, we need migrants now, given how the system works. But of course, that's chief among the issues too, among Irish people, as they see themselves become a minority, and as the government and the regime tells them, well, if you want to not become a minority, and if you're frustrated with the excesses of immigration, our answer to you is that we fall apart infrastructurally without them. Well, the counter argument to that, they feel like that's the end of the argument. It's not, obviously. The counter argument is to say, well, in the 80s and 90s, regardless of, it was there was high unemployment and there's always problems in any era. In the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, we had panel beaters, doctors, nurses, everything in abundance, matching our population, just like any normal country, just like Bhutan, just like China, just like India, just like Indonesia, just like Singapore to an extent. Like, it's a normal, like, if you have a pool of about 5 million people or X million people in a country, there should be a normal relationship between the amount of people in that country and then the amount of people in that country who want to become panel beaters. Call it capitalism if you want to. Just an incentive, a supply-demand harmony going on there. And that should work. And thus, then the demographics and cultural fallout is managed by the fact that, well, no, you don't just look at something like panel beaters or doctors and nurses and say, we must have unlimited immigration or nothing functions. That's a you problem. Again, that goes back to the state. And it's my retort to Simon Harris is, that's your problem. I mean, you need to adjust the economy such as it has been structured only in the last 20 years. It's not been forever. We have hundreds of years where it was perfectly possible to have an economy, panel beaters, doctors, nurses, baristas, whatever you want, in a proportional accordance with the overall population, supply, demand, consumer, producer, services, servicees, whatever. Don't gaslight us into thinking, into believing that somehow that's some impossibility. You need to have a country of 5 million people with an open door to 8 billion people in order to fix a car door, to make a cup of coffee, to treat someone when they have a broken leg. That is not a legitimate position. You can present it as normal if you want to, but we're going to be here. The same people, and I'll get onto this, the same people who've massacred you in the information war in general up to now, let's say on the asylum issue, we're going to massacre you metaphorically in the same way on the deeper questions. We sure will. We've done it and we'll do it again. And I'm just making the note now that the deeper questions will be unraveled. They will be turned into digestible information. They will be spread to the public, and it'll be done by people who are fanatically, peacefully committed to it, and who are extremely talented at this and will beat you on the field. This will happen. So you can play your games now, but the deeper issues are what they are. What we need is reform of the economic and social structure, a withdrawal from this globalization thing, a mass deportation, as Conor McGregor recently suggested, of people who shouldn't be here, a task force on immigration, and stemming from that, a restructuring of the economy and of services to accord with the native population. You need panel beaters, you train up some panel beaters. The population is too low, or the fertility rate is too low, work on getting it up. Redirect the money from the asylum industry to pronatal stuff. Reassert, back to Keith Woods in his recent article on this, reassert a nationalist identity, glorify having kids, contributing to the country, working towards a future of life and of a culture and of people. These things have been done for millennia. They can be done. We can even afford to have a population decline, that's fine. But the whole thing needs to be fundamentally restructured, not to some radical utopia that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the way China works, the way Ireland worked until 20 years ago. I don't have to invent some impossible world where a national population and a national economy actually kind of functions. I have the entirety of history up until 20 years ago in this country, and currently in many leading economies and countries and nation states across the world. So you're the one with the ridiculous idea. You're the one with the impossible idea. So let's talk about it accordingly and move from there. But they can put out their nonsense in the meantime. We'll address it 10 times over. So, I mean, I'm reluctant to pull up sources here, but this is just slightly related. I saw this thing, maybe I'm going on, but it was is it Kalaisen brothers, the Stripe guys, the ones who are currently probably holding up my super chats. Funnily enough, the Kalaisen brothers back new think tank to tackle Ireland's housing crisis. The group, which will bring together some of Ireland's bright young entrepreneurs, will launch this autumn. So I'll long story short it for you. So basically, it's this kind of new breed of like millennial entrepreneurs. They're setting up this Progress Ireland think tank in order to get Ireland moving or whatever. And they wanted to be led by this guy, Sean Keys, who once spoke to Peter Ryan, who's a sort of a fellow traveler. This kind of like tech bro, solutions-based, sort of practical, this millennial entrepreneur vibe. You could say Paddy Cosgrave is in this world a bit, where like, oh, let's just have a functioning thing, like by building up and building out and stripping planning permission nonsense and all of this. But these guys also say that, and it's kind of the Sean Keys guy, he actually blocked me on Twitter because I took the piss out of him one time a little bit. This very aloof situation where it's like, if you say, well, what about the migration question? Even if you just want to low hanging fruit, like, what about the migration? What do you say about it? These same lads you see here, one of the article or whatever, immigration policy stifles their economy. It stifles Silicon Valley, and takes too long for people to get visas, and it crush on entrepreneurial development and the rest of it. And it's sort of like, I see this as a different faction. They're not Simon Harris. They're not the Gombe, future-oriented, dynamic, sort of like almost like John Ronan, in a sense, that we just need to build out the migration thing, not like city state like Singapore or something like that, and it'll all be grand. Like, I want to get rid of them. Maybe I should just get rid of all of them. How about I just do that? Go, well, get rid of the tabs. I can riff. Okay, so bear with me. I'm not using Starlink. I'm using like expensive fiber broadband. And bear with me. So just let me know when the sound comes back. I'll keep talking, but I'm waiting for the tab to close and my computer to catch up. It's just spazzing out. It's open. I've tried to close them, and it's so caught up that it won't even close them. Hemorrhaging viewers, hemorrhaging the vibe, all because of nonsense. Someone says sing a song as a sound check. What's a good song? I'll be honest, there's an Elton John song. Guilty admission here. But what's it called? Sacrifice. Yeah, good vibe. It's like More Than This by Roxy Music, like 80s sort of vibe. So anyway, I'm not going to sing it though. So I have. Oh, someone says it's not the internet, it's my computer. Well, look, if one of you wants to fund me a new computer, I will happily accept one that works. But I currently won't be able to afford that. I'd say I'll stick with the one I have. So yeah. Okay, it's better now. Okay, so the tabs are closed. I'm back. So these Kalaisen guys or whatever, and they're Sean Keys and people like that, they want this vision of the world where let's just cut the Gombeanism, let's just cut the red tape, let's just build up and out, let's just be developmentalist, let's be Singapore in South Korea in the 70s and 80s, let's be Lee Kuan Yew and all of that. And it's like, in isolation, that's pretty cool. But in isolation, that's cool. I support that supply side, that developmentalist, that future-oriented and dynamic thinking. But again, those same lads talk about how immigration control stifles development. So they basically are part of that mindset where it's like, well, we must have an open border, we must bring in endless people, or we must have this sort of free-flowing, basically no barriers to entrepreneurialism. Whether it's migration, rules, state, any of this, let us, the Kalaisen brothers, let us, Paddy Cosgrave, whoever else, let us just lead the way, these kind of like, success stories. And it's like, well, yeah, if you were to hand over the country to, I mean, just give me a 5x5. I hope you can hear me now. If you can't, I'm just going to fucking hide under the desk and leave it. Just do give me something now. I'll just assume I'll just assume you can hear me and keep talking, is it? Yeah. So, like, there's a problem with that mentality. And it's sort of like, I can see how from this kind of left tech bro mentality sort of world, that they see themselves as the inheritors, the replacement narrative for this staid and stodgy system of the past. And it's just, again, the same criticisms I made of Simon Harris and these people applies to them too. If you think that you can just come in with this developmentalist model that throws all sorts of cultural and human questions to the wind, then you're just as mistaken and ill-fated, because you might get some success, but that doesn't work. You go to somewhere like China, I always mention China, they have that. It's all entrepreneurialism. Everything we use is made in China. In fact, and you're going to call me a China shill here, but if ever there was actually a country, you had the decline of the British Empire, the rise of America, the attempted rise of Germany, stifled in 2 world wars, all this kind of handover, a baton of like superpower, always fraught with issues and stuff. But you know, the British Empire was effectively corrupt. The American Empire is currently heavily corrupt and exploitative, in a sense, not to sound like that, but it kind of was, and let's be real, culturally out of place and all of that, where it went. And yet the Chinese Empire, they've effectively gotten to the point where they are now since the 70s, just through making everything, working their asses off at the low level, high level, and being nationalist at the leadership level and all of that. If ever there was a legitimate handover, it's that. Like, think of how they've earned it. Everything we use is from them. They in Singapore, or sorry, to keep saying Singapore, in Shanghai, within like 20 years, they built the largest, most sophisticated and affordable metro system in the world, bar none, with the help of no immigration, just with central planning and high IQ and the rest of it. So, you know, it can be done. This kind of Kaleisen Brothers thing, this worldview of like, no, you just make it happen, you get it done, no nonsense, no distractions, let's just get things done. It can be done, but in China, of course, they do it with no immigration. It would be easy for them to open their borders, listen to their capitalist exploiters, the factory people who want to get Africans in to slave away. Like, they could listen to that, but they don't. And so it's possible to get it done. It's possible to integrate this developmentalist mindset with a basic nationalist, human-focused and country-focused ethos, which is essential, because otherwise you have social breakdown, decay, and everything else. And yet these guys are so in their bubble. That's what I believe. The likes of the Kaleisen brothers, think of how they are massively high IQ. I think they came from a basic Irish background, and they've done so. They're billionaires, and they're all around the world, private jets, the rest of it, right? They don't walk down O'Connell Street and look at it as it is. They are in their bubble, and to them everything is just productivity, getting it done. These guys don't sit around for 9 hours at a time scrolling Netflix or whatever. These guys are in this hyper-focused, almost fanatically intelligent and productive mindset, and they're literally looking down on people from private jets and the rest of it. So they don't really get it. I think that they have this blinkered attitude where if Raj or whatever from India, who's a super high IQ programmer who they need in Silicon Valley, has even a 2-week delay or frustration with his passport or his green card or whatever it is, they think, what silly nonsense, that gets in the way of our productivity. But they don't see that whether you want to offer Raj a clean path into the US or Ireland or whatever, the fact is that doesn't equate to, they don't see the picture of mass society. Let's take a US context. Ohio, people on meth, people surrounded by foreigners, totally alienated and destroyed. The same foreigners themselves will get sucked into this death culture, and it just doesn't work. I mean, Silicon Valley might be fine. They get their people in, productive and all that, but I actually don't even think they're malicious. I think they're just blinkered. They don't get that. Yeah, you want smooth approval of key workers within your economy, the likes of Intel in Ireland or something like that. There's an element which that can be true. But there's a joke I made in a chat group just recently, and I can't use the exact words I use, but you know, what I would say to the likes of the Intel bros or whatever, Intel, who have invested the largest investment in Ireland ever, state or otherwise. I think they've invested 20 or 30 billion in their facilities in Ireland. Massive money. Goes to show you the kind of power that is at play here. My argument to the Intel bros, because the nationalists say it's Ireland for the Irish, all the multinationals out, something like that. It's not realistic. The multinationals are here. They're powerful. It's geostrategic. It is what it is to a point. But my question to an Intel bro or a Patrick Kaleisen or whatever is like, well, okay, say you need some foreigner to work on something in Intel. key worker, high level, strategic, I would say bring him in. Don't stop him. Don't get in his way. Bring him in. Do his thing. It's important. Irish people, the Irish nation state, gets a big cut of the Intel thing in a fair way, and then Intel do well. Your man comes in and does his work. If he enjoys Ireland, enjoy yourself. But you're on a visa for as long as you need to be here, and then probably go home, I suppose. Or if you really want to stay here, there's always a path to some level of immigration for key people and stuff like that in any country, even in China. But I don't see, whatever your view on that, I don't see how that relates to 200 people being shipped in on 200 Roma gypsies and Algerians and Nigerians being shipped in the middle of the night into Cahersiveen in the westernmost side of Kerry, or whatever, to live dependent on the state, to wander the streets with an aim to get a house and live as complete dependents and extend that franchise to 10 of their family each, etc., etc. I don't see how your man in Intel, which is as big as a company as there, as much money as there is, there's only a couple of thousand people working there. These would be small niche numbers, and you could allow a very smooth transition to get him in here for your productive mindset or whatever. That bears no relationship to the 99% of migration as it occurs in the country. Is it that the Indian who you bring in who's talented must have a Brazilian making him coffee, and if he doesn't have the coffee, I don't understand what the chain link is on all that, but it's sort of like, it's just a flawed mentality. As much as like this, the regime as it is flawed. This kind of like insurgent group of think tank creators who want to solve problems practically, who would turn their noses up, as your man Sean Keys, who's set to lead this initiative, turns his nose up. He thinks that's all a nostalgic sort of, this, call it nationalism, call it basic society. That's all that's just a kind of like a romantic footnote of the past, and whatever. And it clearly isn't, because of all the strife we see in Western countries at the moment. But they would need to come to the table and sort of be more realistic. Maybe not talk to me directly, but speak to the ideas and say, okay, you want this developmentalist thing. You want to strive for a robust and maybe growing population, something like that. Like, you name what your issues are. You want the rare 1 in 10,000 people in the whole world genius from India or China to be able to come in here without being harassed on the way in, to do some specialist work. You name what the issues are in specific, not just immigration full stop, because if you say that, then you're talking about Cahersiveen, then you're talking about with the plantation centre, you're talking about O'Connell Street. Just look at it. There's no semiconductors being made on O'Connell Street or Parnell Street, anywhere else. So you need to bring your requirements and your terms, not just immigration as a whole, your specific needs and your specific vision to the table. And then nationalists or anyone with common sense can bring their specific needs without getting lost in nostalgia and overly nationalist fervor, and say, well, let's all us millennials, the nationalists, the people who are against investment funds buying up all of the property in the country. Again, there's contradictions between all the groups I just mentioned there, those three ones, because maybe the Gleisons would agree with the investment funds because it's productive. Who knows? But again, you need to have a rational conversation where everybody can kind of, like, if the premise that is being circumscribed by these people is that we just want the basic premise is we want a better country where people can live and people can work, and things can get done, and everybody can be happy and safe and harmonious and all of that. Well, if you want that, you don't have to be a nationalist, but the nationalist viewpoint is an essential ingredient within that. It doesn't even have to be a nationalist hegemony. The nationalist thing has to be in the mix of that conversation. And while they all just hold their nose and pretend they can't hear it and ignore it, not only does that affect and diminish the goals that I have, but it diminishes their goals, because you can't have a Silicon Valley that's functioning and free and productive and cutting edge. You cannot have that on top of a neo-feudal, looted, diverse mess of a hinterland and a landscape underneath that. You just can't have that. Eventually that buckles under its own disharmony. Much like in China, you have the effective form of Silicon Valley, the electric cars, the AI, all that stuff, the booming economy, the Royal Navy that they print off every 4 years, the metro system, the whole lot of it. They have all that, and it's built upon a country that functions at the bottom as well, in a sense, in a national sense. So it's kind of like I'm just sort of advocating my own viewpoint, but I'm also trying to offer advice, because I'm someone who likes to think I think about this stuff, but I'm not in the private jet. My specialty is looking at the immigration side of things, and I've gone down that road. And I'm telling you now, you don't see it from the private jet, and you might think it's all good, but you cannot turn your nose up at society at large and expect to have because it changes. 1 minute they're all about Portugal, and they're all about Barcelona, and they're all about Costa Rica. These are ruthless sort of people with this this kind of mindset of all about productive and economical and technological development, and this sort of nomadic attitude that might work in Portugal for a few years. And then they say, Portugal's old, let's go to Barcelona, let's go to Costa Rica, let's go back to Silicon Valley. It's a bubble. It's a complete bubble. There's 8 billion people on the planet. There's millions of people in any given country. And you cannot operate from behind your private jet or your large building in the middle of any given city. It's not going to work. So that's what I want to say about them. I've gotten rid of my tab, so now I've kind of, like, what they do is serve as almost just like a placeholder reminder of what I'm actually moving on to next. So give me a second to think about it. I think that's that on them. The next thing I wanted to talk about is I can pull something up on my phone if I need to, different device. So that's actually a good idea. I'll do that in future. But this a lot of it centers around this Keith Woods article. I should really find it. Really good. Like I say, one of the best. I think it's the best. And like, there's nothing in it that I don't know already, because I talk about this stuff as much as Keith does, and a lot of you probably do too. I was kind of thinking about how good it is. It's called The End of Ireland's Great Consensus, and he is just such a, in terms of speaking and writing and everything, such a lucid and coherent thinker, writer, and speaker. That's a pleasure when he comes out with something like this. And if you were trying to describe to an alien who just landed on planet Earth how Ireland got to where it is now, and how nationalism has become so strong in the country, and how the thing that nationalism is reacting to, which is the overall situation on migration and denationalization, how that happened, and how we are where we are in a, let's say, like a 30-year, roughly 30, 40 year, 20, 30, 40 year kind of timeline up until the current moment of writing. If you wanted, like, watch just the overall take, the one take. I don't want to read 20 pieces that go on about it in different ways. I want to read one piece that gets it all in the most concise but also detailed fashion possible. That's your one go-to. And I've seen dozens of people write here and there about it. That's your one go-to. It's the whole picture. If I were to summarize it, and again, I'm using this is something we're all seeing in the last few weeks, but Keith's nailed it. How would I summarize it? Basically, it's that how we got to nationalists being so ascendant in Ireland at the moment, in a sense. One is just the crazy state policy. Two is the political vacuum, the fact that you had Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who were sort of, just became this uni-party liberal state in the early 2000s, and they didn't have a fake centre-right party like many other countries do to absorb the sentiment. They decided to go just full omerta, crush, silence mode on everything, and effectively it's just like trying to squash a balloon in and make it go away. It's going to start popping out at some point, and it has. So there's the supply side, which is how bad the state was with their extremist policies and with their suppressing of any dissent and not even creating a fake dissent, which would have been smart. They didn't do that. And then so that's the sort of, that's on their end, let's say. And then on the other side, the nationalists who will say exploited or took advantage of, whatever you want to say, like basically filled into that vacuum, were extremely effective. The decentralized nature of it, the asymmetric warfare, using social media to affect, using the plantation center. I'll take a bit of credit for that. Using the plantation center thing, because when I discovered that Ballahadreen into Lisdoonvarna into everything else we've had since, I didn't sort of I wasn't just concerned about that. My overall concern was population replacement, denationalization, the whole thing. And yet I saw that. I was trying to figure out how do you address that? How do you talk to some normie about population replacement? It's a bit pie in the sky, we'll say. It's a bit hard to, like, you need a whole basis in like education to vibe with that. But it was like, well, this is the most direct, in your face possible manifestation of those issues. That's completely easy to understand. Buses, guards, 300 people being brought into your town. It's the front line of that issue. And so at the time I saw that as the soft underbelly of what they were doing, of the whole big picture. And of course, then as it happened, they decided double, triple, and quadruple down on that as the years have gone on. So it became the obvious point of contact between dissent and regime, I suppose, on that, and trying to basically grab the people in the middle, the ordinary people in the country, and connect them into this nationalist revision of how our country is supposed to work, as circumscribed by Fine Gael or whoever, RTE. So that's why it was an important thing, but I'm trying to find something here. So Keith's essay goes into it in fantastic detail. Here, I'm scrolling my phone here, like, but there was I kind of want to talk about like how it happened. Well, I've just described it to you in a sense, but like, and also just, I'm going to ramble here, but the talent at play, like there's so much there. Because take Lisdoonvarna, which I always go on about. I went down there. I'll tell you a story here about Sarah Clancy and the whole the op that happened on Lisdoonvarna and where it is now. It's kind of like the tragedy of Lisdoonvarna. It's a complete archetype for the country in a sense. I'll talk about that a little bit, but the Sarah Clancy thing, I worked on it a little bit, but I didn't have what it took at the time. I think I was basically ahead of my time, but I also didn't have what it took, because I went snooping around and I would post things online and let chat groups know and spread the idea, and then I would go make a 2-hour-long video rambling about it in detail, and some people picked it up. And to take from someone like Philip Dwyer, he came up to me at the, it takes Keith's article, right? I'm just giving you a bit of like, you read that, or if you've read that, I'll give you a bit of inside lore. I'm one of the nationalists, one of the people involved in this whole thing. So I was at the Barrow Street Google protest, whenever it was, a few years ago. And Philip Dwyer came up to me. At the time, he had never made a video and never done any of it. And he said, "Oh, you're Garrod Murphy. I've seen your videos," all the rest of it. And I was thinking, oh, just another person saying, "Hello, how are you getting on?" Here's one secret stuff here as well, is that a lot of the people at the Barrow Street protest, they were all lovely, everybody's great, etc. But some of them were on the weirder side of conspiracies and a little bit strange, And so when Phil came up to me, I was like, okay, how are you getting on? You recognize me? That's nice. We're in a niche environment. But I said to him immediately on the spot, I said, "You're normal. It's nice to see. I'm not just saying hello to you in a perfunctory fashion here. You're a normal person." So straight away I was like, "It's really nice to meet you. Actually, you're just a normal person, and so you're interested in what I say. Okay, mad." And so we got back and forth, but not long after, he obviously got the bug, and so I don't want to say I like created Phil Dwyer, but he got the bug. And before long, instead of just someone I had met and someone I messaged or whatever, he was up making videos, and everybody was loving it, and he was confronting people, and he had balls of steel and all that. And he had this big account, and before long, bigger than mine, and he's this almost a household name in Ireland now. And not long after that, you had, maybe around the same time, Derek Bly, same story kind of thing. And two of them created I started, I'm just going to go on here. When I started out, when I first uploaded a video, which felt like the weirdest thing ever, from Lisdoonvarna, awkward, sitting in my car, only talking to myself. I didn't want to confront people. I'm not built for that kind of stuff. But I did what I could do. I would give my analytical strengths or whatever. Before long, then you had someone like a Derek and a Phil who were doing the thing that I couldn't do. I'll tell you the story there about Sarah Clancy, but I basically relayed the situation in videos, but I didn't go in with my phone going and all that, which would have been much better, but it's not me. And then they were birthed and created, and they did do that, and it would give people the story much quicker, much more viscerally, and created this next level. Then you had someone like Keith Woods, who appeared, speaking to the man writing the article now, he came on the scene whenever it was, gradually making a few videos. He's kind of purged his channel lately and stuff, but he had videos about this and that and the other, philosophical and social observations and political, extremely good. Morgott picked him up, sort of like introduced him to the mainstream international audience, and before long he became a bigger thing than certainly me and Morgott. I think it's fair to say at this point, in like almost everyone. He's blown up in the last year massively, but Keith came along with this philosophical and political analysis and talent, like I would say, like globally almost unique talent for what he does across the board, multi-talented, writing, speaking, debating, posting, the whole lot, the full package. And now we're up to the point where he's writing the whole piece on it. So I watched all that sort of happen from where I started out. And when I started out and when I started streaming, I don't want to get the history wrong, but roughly speaking, around when I started out, Gran Torino was out with his face making videos, charismatic, likable, the whole lot. I think critiqued and more than anyone, I would say the Don, who is a bit in the wilderness now. I don't know what he's doing, but the Don, I see him as one of the first ever, likable, intelligent, doing his videos from home, well read and articulate. And I did some streams with him. That was the original phase from what and of course people came before, but from the 2016-17 era, there was myself, well, primarily the Don. There was like critiqued, there was Gran Torino, there was me. And I think of people who were sort of, and if I'm excluding anyone, I'm sorry, but from my memory, it's those kind of who were just putting their face out there and speaking about these things in some fashion and having live streams and stuff. And it provided a basis for other people to see it and think, I'm not going crazy. These people are, if I dare say, most of us who I've included there are sort of normal. They can speak, they can talk, their ideas are reasonably intelligent, and what they're saying is fair enough. And they're out there with their name in their face. I was basically, it's like a form of suicide in a sense, not to be weird about it. That's not how I felt about it at the time, but things were so dicey at the time and so verboten that it was almost like that. It's like you were going to go out with your face and speak against the, however Keith termed it, the Irish consensus. I've lost it now, but yeah, that sort of established. Oh, someone says computing forever, and there's loads of people. I'm sure. I'm not thinking of. He had a massive channel, of course, and still does. But that was the atmosphere at the time, where it was like you were effectively some sort of lunatic. Anyone in your normal life who saw you doing that. I had an old friend from secondary school who at the time, and it was out of like friendship and concern, said, if you want to succeed and do well, like we're at a tender age here of like pushing past mid-20s here. I'm just saying, as a friend, maybe you ought to delete your Twitter. And some of you would react and think, oh, what a prick or something like that. But at the time, his view was, well, you've got potential. You're a good guy and you're my friend. And it's not even that I'm necessarily disagreeing with you on that. I'm not even wading into what you're saying. I'm just saying if you're looking out for yourself here, then maybe you just get rid of that, and maybe it's not too late to just get rid of your Twitter. Like, and I didn't like freak out at him. I just said no way. Like basically, I've been raised in this liberal world where I was told that it makes sense to speak the truth as you know it, say what you believe to be right, and fight against power structures and all this kind of stuff. I had internalized that narrative. throughout college and throughout my whole life in film and media and all that, Hollywood, whatever. And so I just said, I remember, you know, whether it was the Je suis Charlie and all that stuff of like the 2015, 2016 time, I just thought, no way, I'm going to pursue what I believe to be true against any sort of blacklisting and being unpersoned and awkwardness and all that. I'm just weird that way. I'm going to do that. And so I did. And I ended up making this weird, awkward video on Liston Varna and the rest of it, and the live streams at the Dawn. And I'm not trying to claim credit for it all, just giving you my perspective. Then from there, you had these extremely talented people come out of the woodwork, just as they were coming from maybe a similar mindset I did. But they came, it started out and it was just me, those couple of face fags, streamers like myself, and then a bunch of anons, excellent anons. Takes the Late Stage Irelands and all these others, I don't want to name names, but like all these different people who you see around now, some anons were around back then and who I was learning from and talking to, and they were sort of like a bastion of sanity and full of like cutting edge ideas that were just totally suppressed. And I was thinking, well, I'm not even half as smart as some of you guys, but I'll throw the face out and talk about it. And then from there came the others, some of the ones I mentioned. Then not long later came the Burkean ecosystem. Really smart Trinity lads, all that, sophisticated, doing their thing. All these others, and it just led to the scene being created online and offline. And again, the Plantation Center issue from Liston Varna went from there to Ruski to the rest. Then Derek Bly and Phil Dwyer come on board, and it's not just me kind of like standing awkwardly on the corner, kind of trying to feed the story to you, but in a sort of a, like I'm watching and then I'm streaming and talking about what happened. They're bringing it to you direct. They throw on the camera live streams, surrounded by a crowd, confront people, walk into offices, do it all. They take it to that level. And so it all starts, and then you have someone like the Burkean covering it in this very sophisticated, almost university-esque kind of way. You have the Burkean, the wind-up, the phone calls with the Liberals in Trinity, catching them all out a few years ago. You may or may not be familiar with that. There've been loads, there've been tons of moments and tons of talent. When I just think about it, everything from a Grant Torino to a Philip Dwyer to a Keith Woods to a Burkean to 1,000 different posters online who are like some people who work their asses off, obviously get paid nothing, like most of us, virtually nothing. Because that's where the real power comes. It's not for me or Phil or anyone else. It's the base is the base. It's the anons, it's the online activity, which again got suppressed. YouTube banned lots of people, Twitter suppressed people, and then for whatever reason, the tap got turned back on again in the last few years. And take someone like Mick O'Keefe. He was previously Chopper, an anonymous account, right, posting away, doing his thing, getting banned, creating new ones, and new accounts over and over again, posting away to a small audience, let's say. And then the dirt, the Antifas and all that dox him. He comes out, I'm Mick O'Keefe, I am what I am. And now his account is pushing 100,000. He's one of the biggest social media voices probably in Ireland, in the political sphere. And posting like a maniac, like all day long, mechanically, excellently. All of these people, I could go on and on and on. There's so many people. More recently, the Irish Inquiry, Jana London, you name it. Like there's a whole new within. I'm talking about like the last 5-6 years, but then even in just the last year, so many people have burst onto the scene, and it's teeming with life. It's teeming with intelligence. It's teeming with character and capacity, and as one article a few years ago or maybe last year put it, I don't know, it was at Irish Times or what, they said the far right have a communications infrastructure that dwarfs RTE basically, and it's a bunch of people who aren't being paid, who are being persecuted, surveilled, monitored, oppressed, blacklisted, shadow banned, the whole lot. But it's just thousands of people bringing their skills. There's people who are good with editing, there's people who are good at memes, there's people who are good with all sorts of stuff. And it's just this organic wave that's just running at the regime. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And it's a privilege to have been there from early on to see it all go down. And here we are. But yeah, it's a great time, you know. So that's Keith's article. I mean, I got rid of those tabs. I probably had more to say, but maybe I should leave it there. I recommend going to read that. You can find it on his Substack, his Twitter, or anywhere else. Yeah, I was going to talk about the Sarah Clancy Lisdoonvarna thing. I mean, maybe that's a story for another night. I kind of went over it the last time, so I could leave it there. But just how, take that as my start point, how they got steamrolled by NGO stuff, basically, the Sarah Clancy PPN stuff and all that. Then they became a minority in their town, a third of their own town. The largest group in Lisdoonvarna is Ukrainians. And now the same Sarah Clancy, who was leading the meeting against the plantation center, she was not leading. Her and Teresa O'Donoghue were railroading effectively that meeting somehow. I busted them on it, and now years later, they're back and they're facilitating voter drives for these migrants who outnumber locals 2 to 1, or what? No, sorry, 3 to 1. Whatever the ratio is, foreigners are 2/3 of people there. Now these same NGO people have come full circle and are facilitating voter drives for these people in these centres who heavily outnumbered this small town in their plantation centres, who are naturally going to vote as a bloc. So we are where we are. There's the Rory McKiernan thing. He was involved in that too, trying to get us all information from his colleagues in Twitter, apparently, and so much corruption and so much lore there, and yet we are where we are now. The situation's bad, but as bad as the situation is in the country, and as unyielding or whatever, as off the rails as the state is, we're not winning on the ground in reality. In reality, it's bad, but as we go forward, and as there's a dissident movement against the state at large, who have the power, ultimately, the physical power to do what they're doing, one of the only things you could hope for in any scenario like that historically is to think, well, if there is a movement of people who are pushing back on it, is it a bunch of ill-informed people, a bunch of some local people who are kind of like shaking their fists, and that's kind of it? They're totally scattered and all over the place, and there's no ideological core and key capacity within it, and all of that. That's not the case. The infrastructure, the capacity, and the talent among a decentralized and asymmetrically sort of powerful group is right there. Take, for example, around the time of Adam Noonan, when he was stabbed in Carrigaline. This is years ago now, by Africans. A bunch of people all night, not Russians or North Koreans or American Twitter posters, Irish committed people, saw that happen, were upset about it, and said, we're going to post about it. Let's just, and again, decentralized, but let's just, like, a bunch of random people say, I'm posting about this is a disgrace. And instead of it being 10:30 at night and saying, right, that's that, I'll start posting about it in the morning, as far as I could see, a lot of people said, no, I'm going to edit video, I'm going to stay up all night. A lot of people basically pulled all-nighters organically. Irish people being paid nothing pulled all-nighters and just went for it, and the media woke up in the morning and they were in a corner and they didn't know what to do. They were just rolled out of bed and they were thinking, oh shit, how do we deal with this? There's so many NGOs, there's so many media people paid, but that's the problem. We're paid, we're on our thing, we don't really care. And so are we going to stay up all night? No. Our moonshot in London or wherever they are going to go the extra mile? No, they're not. They're just going to perform their role. They're not that committed. There's only very few of them actually committed. And so they were steamrolled literally overnight on that. And so what that led to was Reddit Ireland, because it got into Reddit. They shut down Reddit Ireland at night. So from there on in, they said, from now on, Reddit finishes at whatever time of the evening and it wakes back up again in the morning. And in the meantime, it's shut down because they couldn't compete with the decentralized and committed capacity of organic of people in Ireland. They couldn't compete with it, so they shut it down. And since they've shut it down even more. So now what was meant to be the free-flowing, techie, right-on millennial Zoomer platform that just allows people to talk. It's not the newspaper. This is Reddit, where we do our own thing. Now that they had to become the new high priests, the new sort of scolders and the New Orthodoxy, and shut down themselves to deal with the information insurgency. So many stories like that have gone on. Forced their hand on so many things. We forced the state to become more radical, more unhinged, and the rest of it. And going forward, I'm sort of speaking to the issue in general. Going forward, that makes me very confident that there's such an embedded ecosystem in Ireland that I don't see in terms of the information board. They can show up with buses full of people and guards and pepper spray people, and they can shoot people, and they can, you know, Stinger missile people. They can do, like, they have power, sure. But in terms of legitimacy and the information war, I can well and truly declare that they have lost. And I don't see them undoing that. At best, there's just like with Simon Harris and the Tents and Roderick O'Gorman and even these tech bros and all this, they're all sort of scrambling around trying to look like they have some sort of way of dealing with this. And yet what they are, in terms of the information war, putting aside the paddy wagons and the truncheons and the pepper spray and the institutional blacklisting and all that, the heavy hand, if you put that aside, they are completely at a disadvantage, and they don't know how to catch up, and they don't know what to do, and they don't have the capacity, they don't have the will and the intelligence. The intelligence of Simon Harris's comms person, mixed with Moonshot, mixed with, you name it, 50 different NGOs, isn't even a patch on the decentralized online asymmetric information war, organic, that exists in Ireland. It's not fit to polish their shoes, and so it creates an exciting, as difficult as everything is in Ireland at the moment in terms of a purely combative, peacefully combative in terms of media competing narratives, we'll say. It's a very exciting time in that sense, and yeah, I'd rather be on that end of it, to be honest. So anyway, look, I think I'll leave it there. I was going to look at super chats, but apparently they're not happening. Yeah, I can't find them. As in, I don't even have the option of them. So YouTube sent me some message saying, "Oh, you need to update your so and so," or something like that. And I mean, who cares really to hear this from me? But you know, it's funny. I go on YouTube. I go through their sort of. I'm like, "What do you want?" Like, it was fine up until now. I thought I gave you my stuff, no? And so they're asking for more, and I go, "Okay." And I'm going through their boxes, and it's very hard to figure out. It's not like there's certain Revolut can be decent, certain things can be function well, and yet I look at that, and I'm just thinking this website is shite. It's hard for me to even just the layout of it all. It's like, this is rubbish. And then I see this pop up, and it says something. This is just a general pop up. It says something about, due to what's going on in Ukraine, we cannot accept or allow or whatever narratives that excuse, condone, or whatever it is. So basically, you have to have a one-sided view on the war in Ukraine. Now, that's not just one-sided. Bear in mind, the majority of the world is against the NATO side of things on the Ukraine war. They're against the Israeli side of things. They're against the aggression against China and all this kind of like NATOist mindset, which is why YouTube is trying to dictate. The majority of the world are against that. So I'm kind of reading it going, as a content creator, as someone who might like to comment on that war, or just on global geopolitics from a reasonable point of view, from a majoritarian in a global sense point of view, you're telling me that that's verboten. I can't do that. Like, and then you're telling me to update my details on YouTube for super chats and all this, which I already did, obviously. If I was receiving them before and I plugged in my details and got verified for this and that, I did that before, and now you're wanting more. But when I go to put in the more, it's sort of confusing and hard to see. Like, I've put it in, I've submitted it. Did it actually submit? I'm not quite sure. That kind of thing. Then you're telling me what I can and can't say. When I was in London, I took a live stream in Trafalgar Square of the anti-COVID lockdown protest on Trafalgar Square. I did a live stream of that. I had like 20,000 live viewers. I did a live stream of that at one point. I made virtually no commentary. It was like tens of thousands of people in London, obviously public interest. I just live stream it, and they gave me a strike for that. Now, how does that make any sense under any normal context, right? And yet they did. You can't talk about the Ukraine war except from one point of view, which is a big global issue. It's not like a niche issue. It's not like even this replacement stuff or whatever. That's like a big war. It's like the biggest global news story, and you're telling me I can have one side of it. Your website functions like shite. I sort of start looking at it going, why? Like, you don't have a monopoly anymore, and your product doesn't work very well. Like, why actually should I? Like, why do I have to jump through hoops for you? Maybe you, like, shouldn't you be jumping through hoops for me? I'm a content creator. I do my thing, and it's to everybody's benefit. Surely that's the service you provide, and then there's also this underlying threat that you'll yank it any minute in one way or another. So I am starting to think about. I do have a Ghost Rumble thing set up, and just going over there entirely because I'm kind of sick of it, and it's just annoying. Like, why can't, like, I did, just take for example, right? I've done almost a 2-hour live stream tonight. I'm not a greedy money grubber or any of that. I did a 2-hour live stream. I spent an hour or two beforehand looking stuff up. In the few days before that, I'm constantly doing my thing, paying attention to what's going on, thinking about it. So cumulatively, a lot of work goes into coming on here and doing it, and I enjoy doing it. And there, it's natural and normal that there's this function where someone could say €5 or whatever. That's the basic deal, and yet they're like, no, we'll just yank that even after. It's just annoying. And I'm not like scaldy about money or any of that, but it's like, I don't know, it's just a really bad service, and it's annoying. And what bothers me is I spent years streaming and posting and all that without ever even putting links up for anything. That doesn't bother me. I can live with that. What bothers me is that, say some of you wanted to, I'd be happy to receive, and they jump in the middle and sort of like, oh, whatever, we're just YouTube, so you like, we have to, you're lucky to be on here. It's like, I'm not lucky to be on here. There's alternatives, so maybe I'll go to them. So anyway, that's just my my ramble. And I'd also like to read super chats. I just enjoy the process too. Annoying. Anyway, yeah, so I'll set up a Rumble, I'll post it, we'll go to that, I think, maybe. And then I don't have to watch my R's and other words like a dope. So anyway, look, I hope you enjoyed joining me tonight for a ramble. I'll be back again soon, sort out some of the issues in the meantime, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care. Good night. Ihawa. See you.